Logan Paul. Before we begin, have you ever seen anyone try to silence such powerful criticism that it only exposes them further? Because that's exactly what's happening now. This lawsuit was supposed to be Logan Paul's fresh start, his redemption, the moment he finally proved everyone wrong. Instead, it has become one of the most damaging moments of his entire career. Not because of a new scam, not because of leaked messages, but because Logan Paul is now struggling to conceal what he testified under oath. And when someone of this immense power is so desperate to keep it a secret, that tells you something really bad has gone wrong. All of this stems from Logan Paul's defamation lawsuit against Coffeezilla. Logan believed that suing Coffeezilla would scare him into silence. He thought the pressure from the lawsuit would silence the criticism. But instead, the opposite happened. The lawsuit forced Logan into a testimony session, and now he wants that testimony session buried forever. And no, not part of it, not deleted, not edited. He wants the entire testimony session kept absolutely secret. Page by page, answer by answer, moment by moment. In most cases, when someone requests that testimony be sealed, they give specific reasons. They say, "This section contains medical information. This page includes private family details. This passage reveals information about an unrelated third party." Logan didn't do anything like that. He didn't point out a specific sentence. He didn't identify a single sensitive detail. He simply said, "The whole thing needs to be kept secret." So as I said in the previous video, Logan Paul filed this petition to maintain confidentiality, marking his entire testimony as confidential. This means Coffeezilla cannot share this testimony or any of its contents with anyone outside of his legal team, and he can only use it for the purpose of litigating this defamation case. First, this kind of request to mark the entire testimony as confidential is unusual. That alone is enough to make us suspicious. According to Logan's legal team, the reason is that Coffeezilla cannot be trusted with the testimony. They argue that if it weren't sealed, Coffeezilla could share it publicly. He could give it to other lawyers. He could hand it over to investigators. And according to Logan, that would be inappropriate. The problem is this: none of that is illegal. Absolutely not. At its core, he offered no argument to show that anything in the testimony was sensitive or private. In other words, he didn't really offer any factual argument as to why this entire testimony should be treated as confidential information. There's no regulation stating that legally obtained discovery material must remain confidential forever. What do you think of Logan Paul's actions? Leave your comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to support me. Coffeezilla. There's no rule that says you're not allowed to discuss it, and absolutely no rule that says you're not allowed to bring information to law enforcement. Shame isn't a legal standard. Looking bad under oath isn't a legal standard. Regretting your own words isn't a legal standard. Coffeezilla's legal team makes this clear. They explain that unless the testimony contains genuinely private or sensitive information, there's no basis for withholding it. If Logan contradicts himself, that's not a reason to seal it. If Logan evades questions, that's not a reason to seal it. If Logan admits things that harm his case, that's precisely the purpose of a testimony session. First, he addresses Logan Paul's argument that Coffeezilla failed to try to resolve things with him before resorting to the formal objection process here. As I said in the previous video, if it had been clear from the start that the back-and-forth exchange during the meeting and discussion was simply a waste of overall time, Coffeezilla wouldn't have been compelled to continue interacting with Logan Paul. And here, Coffeezilla is saying that trying to meet and discuss with Paul was completely pointless because Paul had issued a confidentiality agreement covering the entire interrogation. And Coffeezilla was somewhat ironic when he said, "By filing the petition without consulting Coffeezilla, Paul has undeniably signaled his simple desire to prevent anything that portrays him in a less than brilliant light, that is, something not produced by him. And this is where things start to feel uncomfortable for Logan, because he's not arguing that the interrogation itself exposed private data. He's arguing that the interrogation itself was dangerous. It wasn't because of what it revealed about others, but because of what it revealed about himself. That distinction is crucial. Coffeezilla's lawyers strongly objected to this. They stated, very frankly, that Logan hadn't identified any good faith reason for sealing the testimony. He hadn't explained why any particular part qualified as confidential. He just wanted the whole thing to disappear. And that's not how courts operate. Anyway, Coffeezilla then addressed Paul's next argument, the one where Paul complained about Coffeezilla sharing information with the FBI and with the plaintiffs in the CryptoZoo class action lawsuit. And then Coffeezilla said, anyway, disclosing information to the FBI was a legitimate use of discovery materials and not prohibited by a protective order. At this point, it started to feel less like legal defense and more like damage control. Because if this testimony had gone well, none of this would have happened. No one fights this hard to hide something that makes them look good. If Logan dominated that testimony, he would want it public. He would post excerpts online. He would point out specific timelines. He would use it as proof that he was right from the start. Instead, he's begging the court to ensure no one sees it. And that says it all. Testimony isn't YouTube videos. You can't twist them. You can't navigate the conversation. You can't use charm to get away with it. You answer questions directly under oath, with consequences attached. And if this transcript were public, it wouldn't be filtered. It wouldn't be edited. It wouldn't be framed in a way that benefits Logan. It would just be what he said. And if Logan Paul was afraid of people reading his own words like that, then whatever happened in that room clearly didn't go according to plan. What do you think of Coffeezilla's reaction in this situation? Comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more interesting content. Logan Paul. To begin with, Coffeezilla essentially said, "Hey, you're no different from me." Logan Paul's lawyer sent a detailed letter on December 1st, 2025, to the FBI, making his own accusations against Coffeezilla, and explicitly referencing documents he obtained during the investigation, including emails and phone calls. And we're just getting started. This is where Logan Paul's arguments completely begin to crumble. And the more you read the actual court records, the clearer it becomes that this isn't about privacy at all. This is about fear. Logan's second excuse for keeping his testimony secret is truly insane. He claims that Coffeezilla shared information from the case with the FBI, and because of that, Logan argues that Coffeezilla cannot be trusted with the transcript of the testimony. Think about that logic for a second. Logan is arguing that because someone can bring evidence of potential wrongdoing to federal investigators, that person shouldn't be allowed access to or discussion of the discovery documents. That's not how the legal system works. Absolutely not. Unless there's a very specific protective order preventing someone from doing so. Sharing legally gathered information with law enforcement is perfectly permissible. In some cases, it's even encouraged. Coffeezilla's legal team points this out directly. If the discovery process uncovers fraud or potential wrongdoing, bringing that information to authorities is not wrong. It's in the public interest. And this is where Logan's argument falls apart. Because Logan's legal team itself contacted the FBI on this case, using the discovery documents. So Logan's position becomes, I'm allowed to talk to the investigators, but you're not. That's not a legal argument. That's a double standard. At this point, Logan sounded less like someone seeking justice and more like someone terrified about where this information might lead. Because the issue wasn't whether the FBI was involved or not. The issue was what the FBI could see. Logan then moved on to his next argument, the protective order. Logan claimed that a protective order was in place, and Coffeezilla was violating the spirit of that order by sharing information outside of the lawsuit. On paper, that sounds serious. But once you actually read the protective order, it doesn't say what Logan wants it to say. A protective order isn't an overarching gag order. It exists to protect specific types of information, things that are truly private, sensitive, or confidential. Not just anything that would make someone uncomfortable. Coffeezilla's lawyers explained this very clearly. The protection order doesn't say that all discovery documents can only be used in this case and not elsewhere. It only restricts documents that actually qualify as classified information as defined by the order. Nothing in the protection order restricts the use or disclosure of non-classified information. And so this is where I think Coffeezilla makes some strong insinuations about what Logan Paul was so afraid to reveal from his testimony. Here, Coffeezilla says, Paul's poor performance during his testimony is not a basis for keeping the entire transcript secret. For example, if Paul evaded questions during his testimony or admitted to making false statements, this would support Coffeezilla's defense of the truth, which, of course, is not a basis for keeping his testimony secret from the public. Do you agree with Coffeezilla's lawyer's argument? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Michael Jackson. If Paul's testimony contained evidence that a crime had been committed, not only would that testimony not be kept confidential under a protective order or any conventional definition of confidentiality, but concealing it from law enforcement would be contrary to the public interest. And again, Logan couldn't identify any part of the testimony that met that definition. Not a single part. No names, no details, no specific pages. He just wanted the entire transcript sealed. Courts don't operate on feelings. They operate on what's written. And what's written doesn't support Logan's claim. Logan then added another complaint. He claimed Coffeezilla shared discovery documents with lawyers involved in the CryptoZoo class action lawsuit. And he framed this as if it were some kind of betrayal or abuse of process. But again, this isn't illegal. If two cases involve the same project, the same alleged damages, and the same parties involved, sharing non-confidential discovery documents is normal. He also responded to Paul's argument about sharing information with plaintiffs in the CryptoZoo class action lawsuit. Specifically, he said Paul also suggested that Coffeezilla was improperly sharing confidential information with the class action board, citing a YouTube video in which the class action plaintiffs board claimed Paul's defamation lawsuit was helpful to the class action lawsuit. Paul omitted from his motion what the class action board found helpful. This happens frequently, especially when information has already been made public or is part of court records. And this is a detail Logan deliberately avoided mentioning. Much of the information he was upset about was already publicly available. So his third argument essentially states that Coffeezilla did not show any urgent need to submit any part of Paul's testimony transcript. And he says Coffeezilla also did not explain how marking the testimony as confidential would impact Coffeezilla's adversarial standing in the case. But that's not a reason to mark evidence as confidential. Court records, public documents, are things anyone can access. So the idea that Coffeezilla secretly leaked private documents doesn't hold up. At this point, a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Logan isn't trying to protect sensitive information. He's trying to stop momentum. Because if this testimony strengthens other lawsuits, if it reveals inconsistencies between what Logan says publicly and what he says under oath, then this case will become uncontrollable. And this is where his arguments start to sound desperate. Because if this testimony were harmless, Logan wouldn't have fought so fiercely. No one tries to plug every possible leak, unless the ship has already started to leak. And the more he pushes for secrecy, the more it looks like he's trying to stop something from spreading. Looking at the list of categories to protect, and looking at how in his petition, Logan Paul doesn't claim that any information triggers any kind of privacy, whether that's Hayes's or some third parties. Again, unless I'm missing something really important here, I don't see anything in this petition that tells me, well, there's some reason to keep this secret. So, ultimately, I think it's quite likely that it will be dismissed and the testimony will likely be shared. And I would just say that if this testimony actually finds its way onto the internet, I personally would be very interested in reviewing that recording. At this stage, it's no longer about defamation. It's about suppression. And that's why this has far more implications than just this one lawsuit. Because if the testimony is made public, it doesn't just affect this case. It affects every other case involving CryptoZoo. It affects public trust, and it affects Logan's carefully cultivated image. And that's exactly what he's trying to defend. Now, we come to the weakest argument Logan Paul makes, and frankly, this one feels like pure desperation. Logan claims that Coffeezilla didn't show any urgent need to use the testimony publicly, and because of that, Logan argues there's no reason for the public to see it. In other words, he's saying, you don't need this right now, so it should be hidden. But that's not how the legal system works. Public access to court records doesn't require consent from the person trying to conceal them. In other words, what Coffeezilla is emphasizing here is that we, you and I, the public, have the right to observe how our justice system is functioning, because the courts are a very important part of our government. While this isn't criminal law, civil cases still have the potential to powerfully shape our lives and society. And so, we need to be able to achieve transparency in our courts to ensure that the First Amendment rights to petition the government and oversee this government function are protected. And so, any analysis of whether something should be kept secret will need to balance those public rights with the interests of the individual or organization requesting privacy. Coffeezilla doesn't need to justify why the public should see the testimony. Logan needs to justify why it should have been sealed in the first place, and he has failed to do that. Logan didn't explain why any part of the testimony was confidential. He didn't identify any specific page that needed protection. He didn't point out any sentences containing sensitive information. He simply requested that the entire testimony be kept secret. That wasn't a legal argument. It was damage control. Legal analysts who reviewed the records all came to the same conclusion. Logan's arguments didn't meet legal standards, not even close. Courts don't seal records just because someone feels uncomfortable. They don't hide testimony because it might look bad. They don't protect reputation at the cost of transparency. And this is where Logan's situation worsened, because at the same time he was asking the court to keep everything confidential, he was publicly discussing the case on YouTube. He uploaded videos discussing the lawsuit, claiming innocence, framing the story to his liking. Those videos garnered massive viewership. So let's be clear. Logan wanted privacy when the facts were beyond his control, and wanted public access when he controlled how the proceedings were framed. That argument immediately crumbled. You can't litigate a case publicly when it's in your favor, and then demand silence when it's no longer. And so, on January 9th, Coffeezilla responded with an objection to the confidentiality petition. And here, he didn't disappoint. First, he stated that Logan Paul had designated his entire testimony as confidential, citing a confidentiality order and court confidentiality. That order allows a party to designate as confidential only information that it believes in good faith to be confidential. Paul did not provide, and indeed could not provide, any basis in good faith to keep his entire testimony confidential. He also didn't explain why any specific part of his testimony was actually confidential, as that term is defined in the protection order. And this is the part Logan probably wishes people had forgotten. Logan publicly admitted his mistake in an apology video. He thanked Coffeezilla for exposing the problems with CryptoZoo. He said he would fix things. He promised refunds. He promised victims would get their money back. He said the situation would be resolved. Coffeezilla is not a criminal. I called him. I apologize. Step 2. We want to introduce a reward program for players frustrated with the state of the game. So basically, you will be able to burn your original eggs or original animals for casting value, which is 0.1 ETH or the equivalent in BNB. I'm personally pledging 1,000 ETH for this, which is about $1.3 million. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm sorry for how things have gone this far, and I want everyone to know that they can trust me and that I will always take care of my fans and supporters. And finally, thank you, Coffeezilla. You pushed this forward, and I am very grateful for your work and your investigation. And I really meant it. Thank you. He promised he would. Instead, he chose one delay after another, one silence after another. And when someone refused to let it go, he tried to bury them in a lawsuit. Now, that very lawsuit is exposing him in ways he can't control. And if the court rejects his request and that testimony is made public, there will be no turning back, no editing, no escape. Only Logan Paul's own words preserved forever. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to see more in-depth analysis of influencer lawsuits, accountability, and what happens when internet fame clashes with real-world consequences, remember to like the video, subscribe, and follow Influence Circuit.